So we're going to start on the bottom of Ayin of a base of 70b. Today's Daf Yomi is Ayin Aleph, and it's dedicated to a Shmira for Am Yisrael, Yeshua for the Chayalim, Atzah for the Shvuyim. So on the bottom of Ayin of a base, 3 lines from the bottom, the Gemara is discussing a statement that Rav Nachman cited in the name of his student Rav Huna, and nowadays we're not even supposed to lend money on interest to a non-Jew, even though the Torah says you're allowed to. Rav Huna says nowadays we shouldn't. So the Gemara says, but what about the fact that our Mishnah Eitzvei Lavin Mehen Umelavin Osam? Our Mishnah says explicitly we can borrow from the non-Jew and lend to them beribis v'chein beger toshav, and also by a resident alien amongst us. So I'm Rav Chia Bered Rav Huna. So Rav Chia, the son of Rav Huna, comes along and defends his father. He says, and when are we talking about that you're allowed in the Mishnah? It says that you're allowed to lend money to a non-Jew on interest and deal on interest with him. That's only when you just needed to basically just enough to support yourself, basic sustenance. But more than that, it will be prohibited rabbinically, because Rashi says maybe you're going to come to start doing that type of business with a Jew. Ravina says, no, that our Mishnah, when it says you're allowed to do it, it's talking about a Torah scholar, and therefore by a Torah scholar, we're not concerned that if you lend the money on interest, you're going to come to be pulled after their ways. Because time of my God's Rabbanan, what's the reason when the rabbis made a decree against lending money on interest to a non-Jew? Shema Yoma Mimasav, because maybe you're going to learn from his ways, from his idolatrous ways. And since he's a Torah scholar, we don't have that concern. There are some who had this teaching of Rav Huna about not doing interest with a non-Jew. They add on the following statement: the Hadatani Rav Yosef, that Rav Yosef taught, says in the verse, "Im Ketzav Talves Ami Es Ani Imach." It says in the pasuk, if you're going to lend money to my people, to the poor amongst you. Ami v'nachri. So Rav Yosef taught from the Brisa that it says, my people and a non-Jew. If it's my people and a non-Jew, Ami kodim means you have to lend to the Jew before you lend to a non-Jew. Ani v'ashir, let's say it's a poor man and a wealthy man, ani kodim. The poor man comes first. Aniyech yercha, your own poor of your family, basically, and the poor people of your city. Aniyecha kodim, the poor people of your family come first. Aniyercha v'aniyeh yeracheres, your city, the poor people of your city and the poor people of another city. The poor people of your city come first. In that context, Amar Mar was taught, Ami v'nachri, Ami kodem, if it's my people and the idolaters, my people comes first. Pshita, isn't that obvious? That my people comes before the idolaters. Obviously your relationship with your fellow Jews is like family. You have to help your family before you help the next family. So the Gemara explains, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Yehuna, in this context, Huna said to me, means even if you have to lend, even if you have an opportunity to lend a non-Jew at interest, and the Jew wants to borrow without interest, because you're not allowed to lend money to a Jew with interest, still you have to lend to the Jew without interest first, meaning even though you're losing money. Tanya Amar Rav Yossi Bore Semio Seineim Shamalavi Beribis. Say, come and see how blinded the people who lend money at interest are. Because Adam Korel Chaver Rasha, somebody would call his friend wicked, Yored Imo Chayev. He's going to get very upset and I'll start attacking him and harassing him. The Haim, and when the people who lend money at interest, what do? They bring their witnesses, the Lavlar, they bring the scribe, the Kolmas, the Quill, Udio, and their ink, the Kosfin, the Kosman, and they write the contract and they sign it. Pony Zeh. And they're basically writing that this person is a heretic, and they're the one who brings meaning say they're committing a sin, and they bring all the stuff. So this is how blinded the people who lend money at interest are. Tanya Reb Shimon Elazar says, let's say you have money and you lend them out without charging interest. About such a person, at cost of Omer about such a person, it states his money he never gave an interest, and his bribes, and the bribes on an innocent person he didn't take. What it does, this will never falter. But this teaches us, it tells us whoever lends money at interest, indeed, Whoever lends money and interest, indeed, his possessions will be diminished. Means say, if you don't lend money and interest, your possessions will not be diminished. But if you lend money and interest, indeed, your possessions will be diminished. Gemara says, but don't we see the will most people ribis that there are some people who don't lend money and interest become a smotitim and they still lose money. So I remember Lazar, if they don't lend money and interest, they go down, but then they go up. But if they lend money and interest, they're going to lose their money and they're not going to rise again. So now the verse states, Lama tabit bodim, it says in the pasuk of Habakkuk, why about God, why are you staring at those who are treacherous? Tacharish, and you're silent, kavela rasha tzaddik mimeno. Like the wicked one swallows the one who is more righteous. So Amarav Huna, tzaddik mimeno boleya. There's a question, like basically the one who is more righteous than him, the wicked one can swallow, but tzaddik gamar eno boleya. One who is complete righteous person, then the wicked person won't be able to swallow him. Tanya, Rebbe Omer. So now we have a little bit of a tangent, but Rebbe says, Ger Tzedek, when the Torah discusses a righteous, there's a ger. A ger means, today we call a ger a convert. So there's a ger tzedek, that means a convert. Then there's a ger toshav, that means a person who's not of the Jewish faith who lives amongst the Jewish people in the land of Israel, and either he observes the 7 no-eye laws, or he doesn't worship idolatry, but he's referred to also in the Torah as a ger. So the Rebbe says, ger tzedek, when it says in the Torah ger tzedek about a sale of a slave, the ger toshav amor inyan ribis, and when it talks about a ger toshav, the resident alien, with respect to interest, eni odea mahu. I don't understand it. I have a question. So the Brisa continues, ger tzedek amor inyan mechira. When it says a convert with respect to a sale, because it says v'chiyamuch achicha imach v'nimkar. So when it says v'chiyamuch achicha imach, when the poor person will be amongst your brothers, when your brother will become poor, v'nimkar and he's sold to you, and that means v'lo. Not only the Brisa says, not only will be sold to you, he won't be sold to you. He'll be sold to the ger, as it says, leger, ger tzedek, not to a convert, a Jew, non-Jew converted, ger toshav, to a foreigner. Shenemar ger toshav, and mishpachas ger. When the verse says the family of the ger, aker mishpachas ger, what does it mean? Mishpachas ger zeh nachri, means to say it'll be sold even to a non-Jew. Keshu omer aker. This is even worse. So you're going to end up, if you don't obey the laws, being sold actually to idolatry. You'll have to work for the idolaters, the idolatry itself. So anyway, what's the problem here? So Amar Mar ger, not only be sold to you, but it'll be sold to a ger, as it says leger. A memra, this teaches us the ger kani avid ivri. So this is the problem that Rebbe had. Teaches us that the convert is allowed to purchase the Hebrew slave, but we have a problem with this. But it states in the Brisa that a convert himself cannot be acquired as a Hebrew slave. And a woman and a convert cannot acquire a Hebrew slave. So in this Brisa, Rebbe says, based upon the verse, that a convert, that you'll be sold as a Hebrew slave to a convert. But now this other Brisa says that a convert cannot acquire a Hebrew slave. So, a convert cannot acquire. How do we know that a convert cannot be acquired as a Hebrew slave? Because it says in the verse, that at the end of the term, in the Jubilee year, he's going to go back to his family. That's what we require, but he doesn't have a family because he's the convert. And the woman and the convert cannot acquire the Hebrew slave. A woman, because it's not appropriate for her to have this slave living with her because of seclusion purposes, modesty pupurposes, and ger nami, and also a convert cannot acquire a Hebrew slave. Because the one who himself can be acquired, he can acquire. But since he himself cannot be acquired as a Hebrew slave, he cannot acquire. So if that's the case, we have this contradiction, because Rebbe says the first Brisa says that if you sin, you'll be sold as a Hebrew slave to a convert, but we say a convert can't buy a Hebrew slave. So what does it mean? That means Eno Kona V'Dina Yisrael means the convert cannot acquire a Hebrew slave in the same manner and laws as a regular Jew of a Kona, but he can acquire a Hebrew slave V'Dino Kenachri, and his law will be like a non-Jew, meaning say he'll acquire him under the laws of non-Jewish status, which means Tanya Nirtzav Animkar Onachri Eno Oved V'Osaben V'Osabas. That if a person has a slave pierces his ear, in which case he wants to be a slave forever, and also he is sold to a non-Jew, he does not inherit it. Meaning to say that the non-Jew who acquires the Hebrew slave doesn't bequeath it to his children, and so too if a convert acquires a Hebrew slave, he doesn't bequeath it to his children. And all of it was Amar Mar ve'ein isha v'ger kohen eved ivri. So it says that a woman and a convert cannot acquire a Hebrew slave. Well, let's say that this brisa is not like Rashbag. The Tanya, what does Rashbag say? Isha kones hashvachos ve'eno kones avadim. According to the brisa, it says a woman can acquire female slaves, but not the male slaves. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says av kones avadim. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says a woman can acquire the slaves, and whereas in our brisa it says a woman could not. So it must be that our brisa is not like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So the Gemara says no. Well, kasha kamben eved ivri kamben eved kinani. No. Our brisa, which Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying she can acquire a slave, that refers to a Canaanite slave. Our brisa, which says she cannot, that refers to a Hebrew slave. Really? Why? Excuse me. The reason is because Eved Ivri Saniola, because the Hebrew slave, he's discreet. So and therefore, if she sins with him, he won't tell everybody. Eved Kanani Paratzla, the Canaanite slave, is indiscreet. So therefore, if she sins with him, he's going to tell everybody. Tani Rav Yosef, if that's the case, Armalasa, Botarabi Kalva, that it says the widow can't raise a dog. They were worried about bestiality in those days. So widow wasn't allowed to raise a dog. Votishri Bar Beirav Ushpisa. And also she's not allowed to have if she's like running her own bed and breakfast, she can't have a rabbinical student be staying there. Bishlam and Bar Beirav, I understand why she can't have the rabbinical student staying there. Sanila, because it's immodest for her. It's because it's inappropriate, because he'll keep her there. If they're indiscreet together, he'll keep it private. Ela Kalba, but the dog, why can't she have the dog? What's the concern? The dog's not going to say anything. Even the Misrachba, Mirsasa. So what's the problem with having the dog with her? Meaning to say that he's going to be connected to her, and as a result of this, she's going to be afraid to be with him, because everybody will see the dog having this very close relationship with her, and they'll assume that it's because they were lovers. So the Gemara says no. Even the kishajale umtza ma'asrach basar. No, there's another reason why the dog might follow her. Not only if they were engaged in bestiality, but also if she threw some meat to him. And so therefore, so people say no. The reason why the dog is very attached to her is because she threw some meat to him. So now the Gemara says, when it says in the Torah that ger toshav, that what does that mean? What was Rabbi saying is a difficulty? Because it says with respect to interest, because it says if your brother will become poor, and he'll reach out to you, and you should strengthen him. So therefore, since that's the pasuk continues, ger toshav v'chayimach, the resident alien, and he lives with you. Al tikach meito, and the pasuk continues, I take from him neshach v'tarbis v'yareisol malkecha v'chayimach, and you're not allowed to charge interest. He should live with you. But so we see from here, you're not allowed to charge interest to the ger toshav, to the resident alien who lives amongst you, and he's not Jewish. But we have a contradiction. It says, our Mishnah says you can lend money to a non-Jew at interest. Explicitly also by a ger toshav. So how do we explain the fact that our Mishnah says you can't lend money on interest to a ger toshav, and the brisa says you couldn't? So it doesn't say do not take from them interest. It says in the pasuk, do not take from him, the Israel, meaning that part of the verse is referring to the Jew. You can support the ger toshav, but you have to charge him interest. But the Jew, I charge interest. So you can't take from the non-Jew interest, excuse me, you cannot allow to take from the sker toshav interest. You're not allowed to take from another Jew uh, uh, interest, but you're allowed to become a guarantor for him. The Gemara says, "What are you talking about? How can you become a guarantor for another Jew if you're charging interest?" Top of Ayin Aleph on base, Arev Laman. Who are you becoming a guarantor for? Ilema Arev Yisrael. If you're saying that you're becoming a guarantor of one Jew's lending another Jew and you're the guarantor, that's definitely prohibited. Vatana Elu Ovim Below Tzasi. These are the ones who violate the prohibition. Amalva the lender, the borrower, the guarantor, and the witnesses. El and Nachri. So if a non-Jew lends money to the Jew, then you're allowed to be the guarantor in that case. That's what it means. That you're allowed to so that you're allowed to be the guarantor, even though he's charging interest. The Gemara says, but wait, Kiman the Dina, the Nachri, the Azo Baser Arava, since the law of the non-Jew is that they go straight to the guarantor, well, if that's the case, it's going to look a little bit like interest. It's not exactly interest, but the non-Jew is taken straight from you as the guarantor, Rabbi. So he's taking the interest. And then you go and you collect from the Jew the money that you paid to the non-Jew, which is basically like you're collecting interest from the Jew. No, we're talking about a case where the non-Jew said, I'll judge myself by the laws of the Jews. Well, the Gemara says, well, if he accepted himself to judge by the laws of the Jews, then he shouldn't even take the interest. So no, he accepted upon himself some laws, but not all the laws. So now it said in the Mishnah that that a Jew is allowed to lend money to the non-Jew with the consent of the non-Jew. What does that mean? It's an opaque statement. So the Gemara says, the Brisa taught that a Jew can lend the money of the non-Jew with the knowledge of the non-Jew of a low midas Yisrael, but not with the knowledge of the Jew. What does that mean? That he's allowed to lend the money of the that the Jew is allowed to lend the money of the non-Jew with the knowledge of the non-Jew, but not with the knowledge of the Jew. What does this mean? Ketzad Yisrael. So this is the scenario. Yisrael Shalova Motzman Anachri. Ruvain, the Jew, borrows money from the non-Jew in ribis, and he's willing to pay interest. Now Ruvain wants to pay off his loan. Yisrael Acher, he's going to pay off the loan, and another Jew says to him, give me the money. I'm going to pay you the loan plus the interest, just like you're going to pay it to him. Also, that's prohibited because the Jew is paying the other Jew the interest. So that's prohibited. But but if they go to the non-Jew together and the non-Jew just goes, okay, I'll give it to Jew number two, we'll take you out of the picture, that's permitted. And so too, a non-Jew shall love him most Israel. Also, a non-Jew borrow money from a Jew on interest. The non-Jew wants to return straight to the Jew. Another Jew finds them and he says, the other Jew says to the non-Jew, let me borrow the money from you and I'll give you back the money with the interest and you'll give it to him. That's permitted because there it's the non-Jew dealing with the Jew and not the Jew directly with the Jew. So if he said no, I'm going to take you to the Jew and you'll borrow straight from him, that's prohibited. So the Gemara says, well, Bishlam must say, if I understand in the concluding case where it's prohibited l'chumra, where you say it's prohibited, fine. If the basically if the non-Jew borrows money from the Jew by interest and then the Jew gives it to the non-Jew, so fine, I understand why that's prohibited. But in the first case, since we generally say there's no agency for sin, there's no agency by a non-Jew. So therefore, if you're going to say, so if that's the case, in the first case where in the first case where it said that if the Jew will give the money to another Jew under the non-Jew's direction, then it's permitted. But why? You're basically acting as the agent of the Jew in that case, of the non-Jew. And since there's no agency for a non-Jew, we don't say that this concept of appointing an agent applies to a non-Jew. So then the Jew goes and collects it from the other Jew to pay the non-Jew. He's in effect taking the interest. So the Gemara is going to give 5 answers. The Ravacha Braid Ravika is the first answer. The non-Jew says to the Jew, just put the money on the ground, and then you're exempt. And then the second Jew comes and takes the money from the ground. And so it's not, the Jew is not acting as the non-Jew's agent. Well, the Gemara says, well, then what's the chiddush? It's so obvious that that's allowed. Case number two. No, the non-Jew took the money from the first Jewish borrower and he gave it straight to the second borrower. Gemara says, well, it's so obvious that that's permitted. The Jew has nothing to do with it. Gemara says, no, you might have thought to say that it's possible that the non-Jew doesn't intend to accept the money as a payment, but rather he says, I'm going to give this money on the, like basically as an agent of the first borrower because he brought him to him. And so as though he's the agent of the first person to lend it. And so therefore, it's as though you might have thought it's as though the first Jew is lending money at interest. So we say we don't say that. The Gemara says Rav Ashi is going to give a third answer. Actually, Rav Ashi gives a third and a fourth answer, which we reject. Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi says, when we say that there's no agency for an idolater, Hani Mili B'Truma. That's only in the discrete case of Truma. But the rest of the Torah, there is agency. Meaning to say, so therefore, the non-Jew, in this case, is appointing you as agent, and so therefore it's allowed. This position of Rav Ashi is external. Maishna Truma. Why do we say the case of Truma is different? That you're not allowed to, that the non-Jew can't serve as your agent. Says in the pasuk, it says in the verse, and the word atem, only if the only one who can serve as an agent is somebody who's a b'nei bris. He's part of the Jewish people. But shlichus to call it Torah kula, so the Gemara says, but still, that shouldn't be allowed. Shlichus to call it Torah kula, not even truma gamrinu. Well, the whole agency, the whole concept of agency, we learned from truma, so it shouldn't be allowed. So the Gemara says, Elad Rav Ashi Barusi. So we see that Rav Ashi's position is wrong. Ikad Amri, a fourth answer. There's the second answer of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi kamrinu nein shlichus l'nachri. When do we say that there's no agency by a non-Jew? Hanimili inu udi done. That's where he's serving as our agent of our non-Udido, but in this case, the non-Jew is hiring the Jew as his agent. Avinu shluach, but it would work. Gemara says, "Vad Rav Ashi Barusi," but Rav Ashi's position is wrong. Ma'ishna inu. Why in the case of where we want the non-Jew to serve as our agent? Ma'ishna inu adidan duha. Why in the one case we want the non-Jew to serve as our agent is a no good? Atem gamatem or rabba shulchem, because it's a verse. Atem gamatem. But now but we serving as their agent, Nami, should also be not effective because because of the same idea. So we reject both of Rav Ashi's answers. Fifth answer is Ravina. Ravina says, yeah, it's true, the Nachri has no agency, but but from the fact that you're picking up the money on his behalf, that does work. You're not his agent, but you're acquiring something on his behalf. And we learned that out from a katan. So the second borrower is picking it up on behalf of the Jew, of the non-Jew, and he's returning and borrowing it from him. And so therefore, it's not a loan from a Jew to another Jew; it's from the non-Jew to the Jew. So, and how do we know this? Because just like a minor, just like a minor, even though he himself can't be an agent, he nevertheless can acquire something rabbinically. He can acquire that. We're going to say that you can acquire something on behalf of a minor, just like this borrower is acquiring it on behalf of the non-Jew. So too, by this case, the borrower can acquire on behalf of the non-Jew, but it's not the same, says the Gemara. A Jew eventually can become an agent, so therefore you can acquire something on behalf of the minor. But but an idolater can never ever come into the concept of agency, and so therefore you can't acquire something on his behalf. And so therefore that's how the Gemara pushes off Ravina's answer. So the only way it can be done here is if the non-Jew gives it directly into the hands of the Jew, or else puts it on the ground, or the Jew leaves it on the ground. Okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.